In this video, I'm going to show you how to remove and replace rear brakes on a Honda CR-V with an electric e-brake. Go ahead and remove your tire, 19mm socket. So when doing the rear brakes with an electronic rear brake actuator, if you have a scanner, then go ahead and use that. You're going to go into brake pad maintenance mode. And without a scanner, Honda is nice enough to give us step-by-step how to do it without. So we're going to go through those today without the scanner and show you how to do it. First thing I'm going to do is remove the bolt for the mounting bracket for the flex hose so we can get a lot of movement on this caliper in order to take that actuator off without really messing around with it. So 12mm socket, and we're going to find that bracket and take that bolt right off. Set it aside. Now we're going to move right up to this electronic actuator that's mounted to the back of the caliper. We're going to disconnect that connector. Obviously, make sure your key is off, and prior to doing the work, make sure you had no brake lights or ABS lights. So I like to take a flathead screwdriver, a little pocket one, and I'm going to bring right back here and push on this tab. Because you can push on this one and hopefully release it. Boy, is it a lot of work. It's easier to just gently lift up and then pull that connector off. Make sure it's still in good shape. Set it aside. Now with a 12mm socket or wrench, I'm going to take the caliper off the bracket. Break the mounting bolt free on the top of the slider, and then do the same on the bottom. We're going to back these off all the way. Set them aside. Now we can lift that caliper up. Just wiggle it back and forth. Now you can see that electronic actuator. And the reason why you undid that bracket is so that you have movement. You have all this movement to make sure you get a good grip on that. As you can see, there's two mounting screws, one here and one here. And that's a 5mm Allen head. 5mm Allen head socket or wrench, and just break that free. They're kind of tough to pull out because they have a Loctite on the thread, which we will clean and reapply. Now I'm going to take that off and do the top one. See if I can get that in there. Break that free. Okay, once those are free, don't let that fall and slide off. Just grab it, wiggle it back and forth, and pull it up. Now with a T55 Torx, you do not need a ratchet. You're just going to place it in there and turn clockwise, not counterclockwise, clockwise. And just turn it by hand. And what you're doing is you're pulling that spring back so it bottoms out. Really effortless, and it will stop when you bottoms out right there. You can't go any further. Go ahead and remove that. And now we're going to get that tool that can turn and spin the piston back. So you see that notch? You want to line that plate up with it. Basically 12 and 6, seat it, hold it in there, and then you can back this off. My tool is a 14mm wrench, and I'm going to turn that piston in. Every time I take a turn, I'm going to adjust the base. You're going to do it until it stops, but I'm going to readjust it so that that lines up at 12 and 6 o'clock. So if it bottoms out and my openings are at 2 and 7, I'm going to turn it back until it's noon and 6. See right there, I'm at over here, so I would call that 10, 10 and 5. I'm going to reverse it and line that up so that it is right at 12 and 6. Should still give you plenty of room. Then you can remove the tool. Now we're going to dismount our brake caliper bracket from the actual knuckle, 17mm socket or wrench, and let's break that free. Let's go ahead and break the top one free. Go ahead and remove that bolt and then lift up on the bracket. So now I'm going to take a hammer, impact Phillips screwdriver, and I'm going to release this mounting screw. It just holds the rotor to the hub. We're going to reuse that, so set it aside. Now the rotor's on there pretty good, so I'm just going to give it a little tap. Go ahead and pull that rotor off. So you can use a wire brush or a grinder like I use. I use the sanding, not the green, but like it's a buff pad. So I don't want to cut the metal, I just want to take that rust surface off. You're going to do that all the way around. So then I like to take the brush and go right in between where the stud and the hub meet. They do make another cookie that you can put on the end of that drill grinder and get it, but it's 2 seconds. We'll take it with a wire brush. You don't want any rust raised up on this because then obviously you'll get a pulsation. The brake pedal will actually feel that. So the cleaner, the better. This is where I like to take the new rotor, put it on the hub, and I will clean it up. I'm just taking these surface oils off from the packaging, and then I will spin it around and do the same thing. I'm not mounting it, I'm just cleaning it. We'll let that dry. Go ahead and remove the rotor now, set it aside, and let's clean that hub from any dirt. Once that dries, I'll put a copper never seize on there, high temp, and we'll install the rotor. Now our spindle is dry, so we're going to just throw some high temp copper in there. And this is for the mounting surface more than anything, so it doesn't rust up again. Now we're going to take our new rotor. Make sure you line up where that screw, mounting screw goes, right next to that stud. Put it flush. Grab your mounting screw, thread it in. Make sure that rotor is seated flush against that hub. It's good. Grab the hammer and snug it. So now we have our caliper bracket with our old pads in it and the sliders. We're going to clean it up. I like to just set it right down, and I'm going to start with the pins one at a time. I like to take a small pocket screwdriver. I'm looking at the boot, making sure there's no tears in it, no damage to it. And I'll just kind of pop it off of the slider pin, just like that, and pull that pin out. I'm going to take the rag and I'm going to clean the old grease off, inspect it, make sure it's not rusted, has no marks, it's not grooved. If it was, I would replace it, but that looks good. So now I'm going to take some silicone paste. I always put some right inside that boot like that, and that just basically fills up those little grooves, so there's future silicone in there waiting for this. So I like to squish it around, and it makes it a nice flexible boot, gives it some more life. Put that pin in, I spin as I put down, lets the air come up through, and then as you can see it's going to get air in it. So I'm going to pop it down. When it explodes like that, that's air. I'll just take my little pocket screwdriver and pop it, and it will release, more grease will come out and the air will come out, just like that. I'll take the old stuff, clean it aside, wobble it, make sure it doesn't make any noise. Now I'm going to do the other side, and the reason why I do it one at a time, prefer to, is because you're going to see there's a difference in the pins. One will have a rubber boot on it and one does not. The manufacturer puts that rubber boot there for a reason, right there on the tip. It's supposed to be on that bracket, not this bracket. I'm going to clean it up, look at that boot. If it's damaged, swollen, cut, I'm going to replace it. Mine looks good, so does the pin. So now I'm going to look at the boot. Got no damage. I'm going to put some clean silicone in there. Apply a coat to my slider. Like I did the other one, spin it, push it down in until it seats on there, blows up a little bit. I just take my little screwdriver and pop the air out. Wipe off the old dirty silicone. Now that part is done, easy peasy. Let's take the inner pad. The inner pad you can tell because it's going to have the circle where the piston sits, and tap it out. Set that aside. And that's the outer pad. So now we can take the tins off. You get new tins with the hardware part of the brakes, which is awesome. Set that aside. And now we're going to use our wire brush, and we're going to clean the rust off that seating. Rust will cause that tin to push up, and if it does and swells, then you're going to have a pad that's going to get stuck in that bracket, and you're going to have irregular pad wear. We're going to do both the same. Take a little parts cleaner, brake cleaner. Let that dry. So now, when you're doing your rear brakes, match up your inner pad, the one that goes on the piston side, that has the indicator on it. Make sure you have the right one. You know, they put it in a spot for a particular reason. They put it in the same spot so that's the rotation of the rotor. And it's going to get the actual true lowest spot. So you'll get your indicator noise. Light coat of silicone paste or caliper grease. Underneath, make sure I get it in all these corners here. I don't want any water forming. Then I'll take my new hardware and I'll just pop it right down. Once it's seated, I can take a little hammer and just tap it in. Let's do the same to the other side. Now let's put the other hardware tin on, tap it down. And now we can put the pads on. Now this is the outer pad and the inner is where the mounting screws are. So the inner has that indicator on it, and the easiest way to install the inner is literally put the bottom in first, then stand it upright. And you want to make sure that those butterfly spring tabs are on the actual bracket, like that. Let's do the same to the out one. Bottom first, tilt it up. There you go. And there's your anti-rattle springs all ready to go. We can bring this over to the car and install it. Now go ahead and grab your bracket and pads, slide it right on. I'm holding the pads so they don't get spring pop out. Install your mounting bolts. Now I put a new coat of little medium thread locker on there. You do not want to use like a never sees or anti-sees, because if that bracket, for some reason that bolt vibrated loose, that wouldn't be a pretty picture. I always start it by hand. Just do the same to the bottom. Gonna get my electric ratchet, and I'm just gonna bottom them out before I torque them. Get my torque wrench. We're going to set the torque wrench to 80 foot-pounds. Double check. Now we can go ahead and put the caliper on the bracket. So now we're going to grab this caliper and bring it around so I can see it. And we're going to remount that actuator. Let's see how this is mounted. Now there is an O-ring right here. Make sure it's not swollen, torn, or missing. I put a little clear silicone paste, just a coat, light coat on there, so that it can make sure it seats nice and easily. You're going to spin it till it gets locked into that Torx. Line up your bolt holes, and then take your 2 Allen head bolts. And as you can see, they have thread locker on it, so I'm going to add a nice little light coat of the same strength to both bolts and start them by hand. Just want to get one started in place before I do the next one. Okay, now I'll move on to the next one. You're just going to bottom them out. I'm going to go back and forth because I want to make sure that it's seated correctly. Strongly recommend doing this by hand because you don't want to crack that plastic housing. I can't even imagine how much this is would cost you. Like I said, I'm just going to bottom it out on both sides. And now I'm going to get my torque wrench. Now I set my torque wrench to 60 inch-pounds because of the 5mm bolt. And it seems to work out just right. Perfect. So now we're going to take our caliper and make sure that hose isn't twisted all around. And we're going to mount it on the caliper bracket. I'm going to push those pads in, make sure I catch them both. Just like that. There we go. If you have a bolt with anything like that, go clean it on a wire wheel or a wire brush and get that all taken off. You don't want to have that left on there. Now that the bolts are all cleaned up, go ahead and start one by hand. Do the same to the top. That's going to be the 12mm socket. And the torque for this caliper bolt to bracket is 18 foot-pounds. Do the top. Just give it a double check. So now we're going to put our connector back on until you hear it click. And follow that flex hose down. You're going to guide that hose right into the bracket. And there's a little seat for it to sit in. Take that bolt, start it by hand. Once it's started, there we go. Put my 12mm socket and ratchet on there. And we'll just snug it right up. I'm paying attention to that seat because I don't want it not to get seated in that bracket. So there you go, just like that. Once it bottoms out, just give it a quick snug. So now at this point, to reset that electronic parking brake, they have written that they want you to go ahead and put the ignition on, not starting it. Just put the ignition on, activate it, and manually pump the brake until the pedal gets really firm at a slow pace. Feels like it's bottomed out. Hold the brake and activate that parking brake so that that actuator can be seated. Now it's seated and set where it's supposed to be. You can release the parking brake. Go ahead and reinstall the tire. Put the lug nuts on. $19mm socket, and we're going to snug up the lug nuts. Not too tight. Go in a crisscross pattern. Now we can lower it and tighten it to the wheel torque. Now with your torque wrench set to 80 foot-pounds, you're going to tighten the lug nuts in a star pattern, crisscross. Double check. Now go for a road test. When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.